Hey sis, it's Alice Walker's birthday today, the 9th of February 2025, as I record this. And in honor of this, I wanted to share on this YouTube space a essay that I wrote in November 2023 when The Colour Purple was just turning 40 years old after it had been published. And I myself was 40 years old. So for anyone who wants to skip forward to certain parts, everything will be timestamped in the description box or either in the pinned comment. If you would like access to the written version of this essay published on Substack, you can go ahead and find that link in the description box too. So let's get into it. Notes on Alice Walker's Colour Purple. 40 years on, a deep dive. I'd go as far as to say that The Colour Purple is a piece of literature I would insist that my daughter read if I had one. Why so? With reflection, honesty, and an open heart, each woman in this novel portrays how the world sees black women, how we see ourselves, or sadly, in some ways, even how our male counterparts within our own communities see us. Published in 1982, Alice Walker's The Colour Purple won the Pulitzer Prize in April of 1983. I was just 2 months and 4 days old. Revisiting this novel as a 40-year-old woman has been a personal and pleasurable journey for me. I imagine that if all black women sat down and dove into this author's work and sought out the messages within this classic novel, we could all experience a personal and pleasurable journey. There is so much to be taken away from Walker's most famous book. Having more knowledge of my female ancestors' life cycle on a global level and a better understanding of what the challenges were for black women at the turn of the 20th century has helped me to appreciate this author's storytelling a lot more. I was able to see each female character in a different light and relate to them better than I did when I first read the book as a teenager just finding my way in the world. Sofia. Take the fictional character Sofia and her plight. She was a black woman who fought back against what she thought was mistreatment or disrespect. She put people in their place and felt no way about it. Sofia didn't care much for the person's race or gender of whom she dealt with, which was courageous for a woman of her time. She also would not stand for a man to tell her what to do or how to do it, even if that man was her husband. While I enjoyed the way this character jumped off the pages as I read it, her sassy, independent, sometimes blunt attitude landed her in trouble with what was back then the law during the period in which the novel was set. Sofia's brave act of slapping a white woman who she felt violated her was the event in her life that put out the wildfire within her. But was she wrong? As readers, we can recognise how Sofia's "I can do this" attitude manifests in the common independent woman label given to black women today. We can also see how Sofia's attitude is her way of protecting herself, standing her ground and surviving. Sofia's personality type has manifested in the stereotypes about the black matriarch the sociologist Daniel Patrick Moynihan studied in his report, The Negro Family, A Case for National Action, in 1965, just over 50 years after the era that the novel is setting. According to Moynihan, the black woman ruled with an iron fist as the head of the household, with little consideration for the black man. Moynihan called this the tangled pathology, as he asserted in his research that, in essence, the Negro community has been forced into a matriarchal structure, which, because it is so out of line with the rest of American society, seriously retards the progress of the group as a whole and imposes a crushing burden on the Negro male and, in consequence, a great many Negro women. And that's from The Negro Family, A Case for National Action, 1965. In 1965, Moynihan's tangled pathology, as he called it, was out of line with the cultural ideal of the man being the provider, protector, and strength of a couple or household. Sofia's character could be Alice Walker's way of bringing that tangled pathology or matriarchy archetype to the attention of the world in 1982. On the myth of the Superwoman, Michelle Wallace went on to refute Moynihan's observation and discusses the way that black women have been portrayed in her book, Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman, 1979. Wallace asserts that the idea of a black woman being a dominant force is largely a myth, based on the flawed way Moynihan interpreted his statistics, and mostly due to how black women were on the bottom of the social hierarchy at the time. In the 21st century, the black woman is still labelled with derogatory attributes like masculine, loud, aggressive, and seen as a matriarch that dominates the men in her community. The question must be asked, why is this? And also, in whose point of view? Is it from the black woman's point of view? Or if the black woman has found herself in this tangled pathology and reverse role, is this not a natural response to the environment the black woman is often in, fending for herself and sometimes her children? Now, remember what Malcolm X told us in 1962, which was before Moynihan's Report. Malcolm X told us that the most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. Could Malcolm X's analysis be part of Sofia's archetypes evolution that led to people like Moynihan's claims? But I digress. Enter the angry black woman. 40 years on from the publishing of this great novel by Alice Walker, and over 100 years since the period the author captured this plot in, black women may not be going to prison for backhanding or slapping white women in broad daylight, because this was a crime, as it was in Sofia's era. However, we are still fighting, putting people in their place, and generally being seen as the aggressor at times, when this is not always the case. The new term in today's society that has replaced the matriarch is the angry black woman. In today's context, this term comes to mind when I think of Sofia, and this is not because I would like to label her as such, it's because society in today's world has made her this way. I would lean towards what Malcolm X observed in 1962 as to why black women may have a little bit of Sofia in them today. Black women are in a unique position of vulnerability to mistreatment, not just based on her gender, but also her race. Race discrimination can be received from all members of society, and gender discrimination from all men. I've said this many times. There's literally no demographic of society she is not susceptible to discrimination or mistreatment from. Not even the women who look like her is she protected from. Sometimes this is because of colorism in the black community. If the black woman is darker skinned, she is vulnerable to mistreatment from both women and men in her community and beyond. This is something which Alice Walker touches on later in the novel. When one considers the modern workplace, assertiveness from a woman with darker skin can be interpreted completely differently from a woman with white or lighter skin. This is based on the old age views of femininity, delicacy, and softness belonging to the lighter woman, not the darker one. Bell Hooks, 1952 to 2021, clearly defined this significant difference between how both groups of women have historically been viewed, stereotyped, and labelled when it comes to the idea of who and what is deemed the woman, who possesses femininity in her thesis, Ain't I a Woman, 1981. When I was in the corporate world, I can think of countless times I too said what was needed to be said, but always remained cautious of how I worded it to avoid the stereotypes and tears from other women who would be seen as the dainty little flowers hurt by the harsh words by the scary, angry, big black woman. There's a little bit of Sofia in all of us. Deep down, as a reader who absorbed Sofia's plight and experience in The Colour Purple and reflected on her as a woman, I related to her and felt that there's a little bit of Sofia in all black women. This is because there needs to be a little bit of her in us. Sofia must be revered at times for the black woman's own survival and navigation in certain situations, be it professional, personal, or when dealing with men romantically. Her experience as a married woman to Harpo and wanting to maintain her independence, have a voice, or even be brave enough to say no, came across as an authentic experience of black women. 40 years after publication and more than a century since the period that it was set in, there has been little evolution. All that's happened is Sofia's experience has been repackaged. Now, the experience the black woman has when she expresses her grievances, whether in a relationship or professional context, is getting labelled as difficult, masculine, or non-submissive. The reality is, more likely, there is no fault in her. The men she crosses paths with are not giving her an incentive or a reason to, quote unquote, submit to them. Probably because they can't lead themselves, let alone a woman who has her life together and her affairs together. The other side of the black woman's experience, even if she's not overly dominant as Sofia, is even worse. If a black woman earns more money than her partner, has a professional job deemed as better, quote unquote, than his, or was in any way self-sufficient before he came along, or even worse, earned this personal achievement during the dating period, it's a wrap. Speaking from experience, yes, I have had my first husband resent me because of my career, my salary, what I owned, my home, my car, and everything in my own name, and my ability to look after myself, and then my ability later on to look after myself and our son. Did I throw any of this in his face? Nope. Did I make him feel less of a man intentionally? Hell no. But yes, I was told outright that this was an issue with me that he had. The non-combative, supportive, kind, cooperative wife I was, who just happened to earn more than he did and could look after myself and later our child, that was an issue that sparked his jealousy. And yes, he used the term jealousy when he explained this to me, and he then turned abusive to both me and my son. Choosing better, as black women are often told, is what I did. Jealousy was the last thing I would have imagined because I saw us as a team. Pauline Marshall makes reference to this experience for the black woman in her essay, Rena, 1962. Marshall confirms her observations and experiences from just over 60 years ago at the time of me writing this, that eligible men around to date at the time purposely chose to marry women without degrees, the fat jobs, and who were no threat. That's a direct quote from her work. I've read countless blogs on women's experiences when they out-earn their partner, and in the written version of this essay, you will find the links there if you wish to follow that up. I've also heard it from the mouths of other black women, and it appears to be a very common experience for black women to have. It's either that or they are floating households on their own, unhappily, while they are in these relationships, which I guess would make sense if, according to current data at the time of me writing this, in the USA, black women are the largest group in society, gaining higher degrees and starting businesses, hence increasing their earnings each year. And again, in the written version of this essay, you will find the link to that research there. In my own part of the world, in Europe, where I'm based, it's also clear to see that black women generally are standing very well on their own 2 feet in their pretty stilettos that they've paid for outright themselves, and good for them. She wasn't wrong, was she? Was Sofia wrong for her attitude towards Harpo? Nope, not from what I read. He didn't appear to be a man worth, quote unquote, submitting to. I don't like that term and use it so loosely. And his father was not leading him in the right direction either, as an example. He didn't appear to be a man that understood that men, the right ones who know how to, can bring out a woman's femininity when they are operating fully in their own masculine energy. Meaning, if any man has something to offer a woman outside of sex, good looks, when he infuses her with positive energy and nourishes her with his own energy, his own masculine energy, a woman could naturally soften towards him. Masculine energy is not about strength in the physical body. And if more men realize this, they would probably attract and keep the women that they actually want. About the term submission, The word submission that is thrown around so casually by men these days as something they require from women to provide them with something other than dick and headache really annoys me. Submission, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is a noun and states that the act of accepting that somebody has defeated you and that you must obey. Exactly when did relationships and marriage become about this in the 21st century? Why are men so hell-bent on women, quote unquote, submitting to them? Not all men, but just certain demographics of men get caught up in this notion. Sure, there's traditional vows said in a church wedding which allude to obeying, quote unquote, your partner. And if my memory serves me correctly, not even Kate Middleton, who is the current Prince of Wales and British monarch, agreed to use the word obey in her wedding vows when she married Prince William in 2011. Submission also indicates that one person is subordinate, below, or on another level. The person who is in submission is deemed less than. In order to feel some kind of masculinity and in exchange for provision for women and children, this is what some men require from women today. Harpo, in The Colour Purple, he appeared to be one of these men. This is especially true, I think, for black women, and it's what's required from them because we have been historically and are presently in high numbers breadwinners, survivors, hard workers, community builders, mothers, friends, carers, and generally the backbone of our community and household. As Moynihan pointed out in 1965 in his report, we can still see this in 2023 at the time of me writing this essay, and even now as I record this for a YouTube video, we still see it in 2025. It's my belief this is why black women always have a little bit of Sofia in them. The right man, the right environment, and the right respect for her, her hair, her body, her ambitions and goals, her voice, her point of view, her culture might soften the Sofia within her. This is something that can be noted especially for men who try to demand submission, just like Sofia's husband Harpo did, without correctly loving her or offering her much else. What did make me laugh was Harpo's attempts to literally beat Sofia into submission and how this backfired on him, no thanks to Celie and her influence. Talking of Celie, the innocence that Alice Walker portrayed in her character really captured me. Her speech, thought processes about the world, and even how she told Harpo to beat Sofia into submission screamed vulnerability. She was so vulnerable that she felt, in her distorted view, that physical abuse was right, justified, and something that women should expect or become accustomed to if they don't, quote unquote, act right, as she said, and she acted right to Mr. her own husband. The University of Chicago Women's Leadership and Resource Center reports that 54% of women who identify as black have experienced psychological abuse. And again, in the written article, you will find the link to that research there. And I will place myself in that category too. But I was so young, I was unable to recognize it until I left the relationship of my own free will. 40% have experienced physical abuse. I will add my own sisters into this category as well. Their data shows that black women are 3 times more likely to be killed by a man than a white woman. And 91% of black women killed by men knew their killers. The rate at which black women suffer from abuse at the hands of men is high. So high that people like Celie, it can appear to be normal to them within the world of the average black woman. Especially if, like Celie, this woman is from a poorer background, has low self-esteem, and is not highly educated on the subject. Corbin Place, a housing service for women who have suffered domestic violence, confirmed in their report, A Layered Look at Domestic Violence in the Black Community 2020, that Black women also don't necessarily want to turn an abusive partner into law enforcement. Now, this is a direct quote from their research here. I have been told personally by a survivor they can't get help because they don't want their partner to become a statistic. End of quote. This was said by Celie Johnson, Director of Strategic Incentives at the Domestic Violence Network. Another direct quotation here. There's a genuine and legitimate fear that if they call the police, their partner could be killed or they, as a survivor, could be killed. End of quote. The links to this research and what I've quoted to you can be found in the written article. The issue around police brutality against the Black community is another subject altogether. However, it should not be overlooked that this comment from Corbin Place removes the focus from the violence that Black women are subjected to as an issue. From this one observation by Corbin Place, it shows that it is common for Black women to shift the priority of their own protection and make the protection of abusers a priority. Violence or non-violent abuse against Black women is so abundant, so accepted, and so expected by some Black women that their response to it removes the spotlight from them at their own detriment. This is backwards thinking. If Black women wish to stop the normalisation of violence against them as a group of women. Celie's mindset in The Colour Purple was the same, given how she responded to Harpo and how he should handle Sofia. How she felt she should be cared for, respected and loved as a woman was distorted and is a lesson for us all to take note of, as well as the research findings that I've cited for you above. On the other hand, as her storyline progressed, we see the little timid girl, or better yet, a caterpillar that blossomed through all the hardship that her life handed her, mainly from men. To see her growth, strength, and even her own inner Sofia become activated as the novel progressed at times really brought tears to my eyes. I started to wonder all these years later, since the publication of The Colour Purple, is there a part of Celie in All Black Women too? By this I mean expecting or tolerating physical abuse, being used as a sexual object, tolerating sharing a man and his community dick, expecting to be cheated on, lack of self-love, seeing ourselves as unpretty because of our skin tone, hair texture, features, etc., etc. Yes, sounds pretty much like Celie is the Black woman's experience as well still today. But why is this? Low standards and expectations from romantic partners, being afraid to say this is not what I want and goodbye. The verbal reminders that we get as well from our own male counterparts, just like Celie did in the novel, about how unattractive darker skin or tighter curls are. Also, not seeing ourselves represented in the beauty industry. And if we are, it's often an imitation placed on lighter skin with features that are more European. Then there's being forced to live up to a beauty standard that really is not ours. All these things are reasons why Celie's character is revered as an experience for Black women even today, just as much as it was at the turn of the 20th century when this novel is set. I must confess, a long time ago, I stopped listening to what society and men expected, and I stopped listening to what they want to call beautiful, quote unquote. I see myself as drop dead gorgeous already, and I wish as many women, around the world and as many of us would feel this way as possible. If so, just like Celie, we can turn into a wonderful butterfly or a beautiful swan, regardless of what society wants to place in front of us as a barrier to valuing ourselves and seeing our own beauty and worth. Shug, on the other hand, was a character that did not have this trouble. Shug came across as confident, no nonsense, and a very loving and warm woman. From reading Alice Walker's other work, Gathering Blossoms Under Fire, The Journals of Alice Walker 2022, which contains her personal journals from the 1960s to the early 2000s, I started to place aspects of Shug into the author herself. Shug loves to travel and seemed to be a citizen of the world, or much like a citizen of each state in the USA in the context of the novel. She was glamorous outspoken, and bisexual. These are all things which come across in Alice Walker's own personal journals that I mentioned above in her own autobiographical work. On the other hand, in parts of Gathering Blossoms Under Fire, the personal journals of Alice Walker, you can clearly see areas where the author has struggled with her looks and beauty at times in her early life. The issues she had were rooted in her experience growing up with her father's colorism. As a reader, we can see how she internalized this. Could it be then that Seeley is another side of the coin, and both Shug and Seeley are parts of the author herself? After reading both works and reflection, it appears to me that this could be the case. What can be taken from Shug's character is her carefreeness, the way she accepts herself for who she is, her unapologetic ways and confidence. If Seeley is revered as the black woman's experience today, could part of Shug Avery's bold and fearless character be the antidote to this? Maybe. Nettie, the brave heart who ran away from all she knew and dared to think of a better tomorrow for herself, is otherwise known as Seeley's sister. What a life and experience she had that brought so many blessings to both sisters by allowing Nettie to remain close to both Seeley's biological children, who were taken from her. Here we see a woman who possibly could have been considered bougie from her own aspirations, the fact that she could read, she tried to teach her sister how to, and wanted no parts of the quotation marks here, poor southern life that was on offer if she remained rooted where she was. This was a breath of fresh air to read. Her character helped to pick up the novel in a positive way. Her journey across Africa, which again seemed semi-autobiographical, as in the 2022 publication of Alice Walker's journals, we learned that she too travelled across the continent. In the context of the story's plot and timeline, showed Seeley, when she was eventually allowed to receive Nettie's letters, that there's a whole world out there waiting to be discovered if you dared to reach for it. Could Nettie be another antidote to the black woman's experience today? If one places Nettie's daring spirit in the modern context, maybe so. On the other hand, she is already the antidote to the black woman's experience when you consider the degrees being gained, the businesses being opened, and the salaries being earned as we break glass ceilings and enter spaces previously that were only reserved for what society deemed appropriate for other demographics of people. The bravery of Nettie and her bougie aspirations, even if they were probably more to do with her security and survival than thinking she was too good for where she was, has translated in a positive way for black women. Financially speaking, as black women are earning more, being very highly educated or becoming very highly educated, and creating additional streams of income and wealth via businesses for themselves. Mister, what a character. As I write this, my mood instantly darkens, and I consider the increasing rate of femicide against black women in the USA, the high levels of domestic violence across the globe, and a higher divorce rate, the marriage rate for black women, according to Bowling Green State University's 2018 study, Marriage to Divorce Rate Ratio in the USA, and the sentiments that Dr. Ralph Richard Banks has in his own book, Is Marriage for White People, 2011. And in the written version of this essay, you will find links to both those studies there, where he cites the result of black women who basically limit themselves to only one demographic of men, leading to a lesser chance of finding a suitable husband, or even worse, marrying down. Taking all this into account, Mr. exemplifies the characteristics that cause a woman to want to divorce or leave her union, as Seeley did. He is the kind of man that could lead a woman to marry down, and he is or was in the novel an abusive husband. His treatment of black women, forcing Seeley to share him with another woman, the slurs that black women are subjected to around their hair, features, bodies, and how undesirable certain skin tones are, all came from him. Based on Alice Walker's novel, the recent data and the well-researched books on the market mentioned above, plus the remarks that we see on social media from our counterparts about how, undesirable we are, or what undesirable characteristics are based on hair, skin, etc. Taking all that into consideration, is it fair to say that Mr., this character, is possibly likely to be our dating experience and our experience romantically, generally speaking, as Black women? I think so. I have certainly met my own mister, and once I realised what was going on, I said goodbye for good. I think it would be fair to say that we've all met a mister at some point, but what we do with him and how we handle him when we meet him, that is another story. This is where I believe firmly, after reading books like Is Marriage for White People, studying the data for myself about marriage outcomes for Black women, and using my own experience personally, that we should encourage Black women to be more open to dating all races, all ethnicities of men who prove themselves to be worthy to her, and may the best man win. I do not believe in restricting yourself to one demographic or race or type of man at all. As a woman, who are you most compatible with? Who presents himself as an actual husband, mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually, and sexually, is key over and above his skin tone. Skin tone fell off my list of necessities in quotation marks once I deep dived into the data around marriage for Black women. I had my own experience of marriage and divorce at a very young age as a Black woman, and I looked at my previous dating experiences before marriage, all with deep reflection. I realised if I want a different outcome, I can't keep continuing to do the same thing when it comes to dating. I also read self-help books around marriage and relationships, which really opened my eyes. It was clear to me from all this and from opening my own dating options with men that being equally yoked, and I put this in quotation marks to place it in biblical terms for the religious folk who may be listening to this, and I am not a religious person at all, but this is just to put it into context so you can understand the point that I'm trying to make. Having this kind of suitability or compatibility with a man is not dependent on his skin tone. There's a lot more to it than this. If being well suited to a partner is based on their skin tone, it's likely to end in a disaster if that's the only thing you're basing it on. This is something I really need as many Black women as possible to understand, and understand quickly. The statistics for us around dating and marriage are not good, and it's my one wish for this that they improve. While it is becoming clear that more Black women are raising, the standards and expectations while they are selecting men, and they are opening their options and dating all races, ethnicities and nationalities of men, I support all Black women partnering with a man or a woman who shows her she is loved, adored, treated well, not seen as competition, she is a priority, and she is appreciated rather than tolerating anything less. As I absorbed this character Mr. and what Alice Walker was trying to portray here, I intuitively picked up on how the Black woman is often disrespected within society and dating, and left to her own devices in the home, just like Celie was. Further research I called on while reading were sociology studies such as The Negro Family, A Case for National Action, 1965, and also the follow-up report from this study, which was done 50 years after its original publication. The follow-up study, you will find the link to that in the written version of this essay. I also picked up from Alice Walker's writing, the Black woman is often talked down to and looked down on in society, but then she is needed when the shit hits the fan at the end of the day. This, in a nutshell, is the dynamic between Mr. and Celie in this novel. The personality transplant that Mr. seemed to have at the end of the novel, to me, was somewhat surprising. But then, when I considered the reality of what could happen to a man like Mr. without a woman like Celie, who was willing to put up with his behaviour, his change would have been inevitable. After that reflection, it became clear to me that no wonder he had a word with himself and checked his behaviour. He saw how his own reality could be without Celie, and he saw his own downfall, especially when she and Shug left as the novel progressed. His loss of Celie and his downfall was better shown in the movie adaptation of the book than the novel itself. And by this, I mean the original movie, not the remake that they were making around, I think it was 2004. However, the fact that he asked Celie to remarry him, and this is a direct quotation from Mr. himself, in spirit, not just in flesh this time, towards the end of the novel, it almost made me want to vomit in my mouth. I then thought about the misters I had met and saw the similarities between the fictional version and my own reality. Yes, it's the natural way. Men like this always come back and learn the hard way. We as women need to keep rejecting them, as Alice Walker made Celie do, and thank goodness for that. This is the main learning from Mr's character, the understanding that while his behaviour may be normal in quotation marks for a large number of black women to cross paths with, it is not normal in quotations again as a behaviour for us to accept. Secondly, that if these souls do some searching and they find their way back to a woman that they mistreated, rejection is the antidote to them when they come back to disturb any woman's peace, just like Celia showed us in the novel when she rejected Mr. Her peace was maintained without him, especially once Nettie and Shug and her children came back home. So thank you, Alice. I feel like I owe a lot to the author for this novel. Not only has it opened my eyes personally as a woman, but it has allowed me to understand, appreciate, and honour being a black woman who knows her worth in a society that may not always want her to see it. The inner Sofia that we all have should not be suppressed. I feel on reflection, after rereading the novel as a 40-year-old woman at the time when I wrote this, not in the face of society which may devalue you, she should always be on hand just in case she's needed. Nettie's bravery and ability to dare to find a better situation should not be overlooked. Her plight is valuable. It's very, very valuable, and it's one to take note of. Her energy and efforts served her well. Shug's openness and freeness helped her to see and experience different things, even if not all of them were pleasant. This could be translated and manifest as being able to create the life that you desire and want as a black woman in a world that may not always value you, or worse, may not want you to even value yourself. Shug's freeness and openness for black women can translate into her dating choices, her freeness and openness to discover, date, and scope out who she wants to date. You know, whoever proves himself to be worthy of her based on the standards she has set for any man who wishes to be part of her life. Shug's freeness and openness to create the life you envision and not feel bad about your achievements. Your degree means nothing, in quotation marks. Your high salary won't keep you warm at night, in quotation marks. These are often things we hear thrown our way, especially from men in the black manosphere. I have seen a lot of this on social media. That degree, that education, that salary will raise you out of poverty. And this is what they're failing to recognize. And it will generate generational wealth for you and your children should you have them. And if you don't, if you decide not to have children, which is fine, it will provide you with the lifestyle that you would really like. So what's wrong with this? Now, Mr. serves as a reminder to have high standards and expectations while dating and not to listen to the voices of men who see no beauty in you for whatever reason. The Colour Purple is a great novel, full of lessons, even if the plight of the black woman today mirrors a lot of what Alice Walker fictionalised 40 years ago in a story placed in a context over a century ago. This is why if I had a daughter, I would insist that she read it later in life as a grown woman, just as I did as a 40-year-old woman, and with some experience under her belt so that she too can see what gems Alice gave to us. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video essay that I've shared with you today on Alice Walker's birthday, the 9th of February 2025. Please do give the video a like. Please do drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. And if you enjoy content like this, by all means, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Much love, the Black Woman Essayist.